Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello everyone. Welcome back to the Natural Super Kids podcast. Today we are covering our second topic in our eczema and allergies series. So if you missed last week, you can go back and listen to that either now or after. You don't have to listen to these episodes in any particular order. Last week we talked about why so many kids are experiencing eczema and allergies and what parents can do about it. And today we're going to be talking about what the medical approach is missing when it comes to eczema and allergies. This is a juicy one, so I'm excited to dive in with you. When it comes to eczema and allergies, often parents are encouraged really to manage symptoms. So if you've ever felt like you're just managing symptoms with creams, antihistamines, excluding certain foods from the diet, but never really getting answers, you're going to really enjoy today's episode. So I want to stress that I think, the medical approach to eczema and allergies does have some important tools, but it's often missing the bigger picture. So it's often just focusing on that symptomatic management, which can be really important at certain times. But I like to zoom out and look at the bigger picture as to how can we sort of manage this long term without having to rely on medications, medicated creams, or excluding foods from the diet long term. So if we go to a GP and our child's got eczema, we will generally be recommended or prescribed moisturizers, topical steroid creams, maybe antihistamines, sometimes even systemic medications, based on the severity. So some kids are prescribed things like immunomodulators, for example. And if our kids have allergies, we're told to avoid the known trigger or the known allergen, and we might be prescribed some symptom sort of managing medications like antihistamines or adrenaline EpiPens for serious, allergy reactions. So these are important medications for some kids. They can be life-changing, life-saving, particularly things like EpiPens, but they're not addressing the internal factors that influence how our kids' immune system is behaving long term. So when it comes to these medical approaches, they're reducing symptoms, but they're not looking at why the system is so reactive in the first place. So let's look at the bigger picture and what is actually, underneath eczema and allergies when we're looking at it from a big picture point of view. So eczema and allergies involve immune dysregulation, and we talked a lot about this in last week's episode. The immune system is reacting inappropriately to harmless substances, whether that's dust mites or pollens or grasses or dairy or, egg or nuts, some of those common food allergens. So these things aren't dangerous, as they are. It's the way that our kids' immune systems is responding to these things that make them dangerous. The other thing that there can be a bit of confusion about are, the different types of allergies from, that there's obviously the IgE reactions, the classic allergies. These are easily diagnosed. You will know if your child is allergic to nuts, for example, or eggs. But then there's the IgG reactions, which are slower reactions. They're harder to determine because they can take a little while to come on in terms of, the symptom picture. And so these are known more as intolerances and sensitivities. So when we're looking at testing, I think it's important for parents to know that, yes, allergy testing can be really helpful, but it only will sort of effectively pick up IgE reactions, those more serious reactions. So you might be told that your child is not allergic to any foods, even though you can clearly see they're reacting to foods, maybe not in a severe way. But I do think that that's important to note that these IgG reactions are often undiagnosed, and it can be really hard to get a clear picture of what your child might be intolerant or sensitive to. So often parents leave appointments with doctors, medical professionals feeling dismissed, like they just have to cope with these symptoms. And that's because I guess the advice that we're given from medical professionals is designed to manage symptoms and not build tolerance or resistance long term. And then there's the limits of restrictive diets that I want to talk about as well. So this is common both with medical practitioners and also with, naturopaths and more sort of complementary or alternative health practitioners, is that patients are told to remove more and more foods from their diet. This particularly happens in those more sort of food sensitivities, food intolerances, as opposed to food allergies, because yes, we do need to avoid those IgE allergies. We don't want to give our child nuts if that has come up as an allergy, in a skin prick test where they're testing for those IgE reactions, which is the allergies. But if our kids have got sensitivities or intolerances, often we end up on this bit of a roller coaster or treadmill of like, okay, now remove this and now remove that. And yeah, they're a bit better, but they might be reacting to this. But this can be harmful long term because of the nutrient gaps that can be sort of created. So if your kids are having to remove more and more foods from their diet, they may not be getting, some of the crucial nutrients that they need. And it can also create more sensitivity, more stress for families, and even more sensitive immune systems over time. So focusing on food restriction, again, it's not a long-term answer. Yes, it can help in the short term to manage symptoms, but it doesn't teach the immune system to tolerate. It just, avoids that particular trigger for the immune system. And over time, for some people, the immune system can become more sensitive. So avoiding foods doesn't build resilience. It can be helpful in the short term, but it can be quite stressful to have to keep removing more and more foods from your child's diet as well. The other thing that can happen on restrictive diets is that we can really be reducing the amount of valuable fibers going into our kids' diet. So the FODMAP diet is a really good example of this. And lots of people get really good results in terms of their digestive symptoms when they go on a low FODMAP diet. But if anyone knows anything about the FODMAP diet, it does remove a lot of healthy foods, healthy veggies, healthy different fruits. And so it can really reduce the amount of fiber, particularly prebiotic fibers that are in the diet, and that can have a negative impact on the microbiome. So these sorts of restrictive diets can be helpful short term while we work on optimizing the gut microbiome, regulating the immune system, and improving digestive function overall, which is what I really want to talk about now. So instead of just, preventing those reactions and avoiding triggers and reducing the itchiness or the sneezing, for example, some of those common symptoms that kids are experiencing, we really want to have a more long-term approach. We want to help the immune system become less reactive and more regulated over time. And there's really sort of four main parts to this. And so I want to talk these through one by one. The first one is enzymes. So a lot of food intolerance and sensitivities come from our body not producing enough of any particular enzymes that help us break down food. So lactose intolerance is a really good example of this. So if someone is lactose intolerant, it means that they are lacking the enzyme to break down the carbohydrate portion of dairy, which is lactose. It's very different than a dairy allergy or, even an intolerance to dairy protein. This is more the like an intolerance to the sugar part, the carbohydrate part of dairy. So lactose intolerance happens when someone doesn't have enough of an enzyme to break down the lactose. And so if we can start to encourage the body to produce more enzymes, not just lactase, which is the enzyme that breaks down lactose, but other enzymes as well, we can really help the patient, the child or the adult, to tolerate more foods because their enzymes are working more effectively to break down the food. Now, this is going to look different. Exactly how this looks is going to be different in every different person, depending on the food sensitivities or intolerances they have and their overall digestive function. But I guess what I just want to make sure that you're aware of here is that overall digestive function and digestive processes are often lacking in kids that have a lot of different food intolerances and sensitivities. And if we can promote healthy production of these enzymes or even take some enzymes, you can get enzymes in supplement form that can really help with some intolerances that are related to enzyme deficiencies. The second one is the gut microbiome. And I feel like I talk about this in nearly every single episode that we talk about. I talked about gut microbiome diversity a lot last week in our first episode in this series. But what I want you to know here is that in the modern day world, our average gut microbiome diversity is much lower than it once was. And that influences the way our immune system responds to food, to environmental substances. And so that gut microbiome diversity is really important. We want to build that up when it comes to kids with allergies and eczema. The third part I want you to be aware of is the barrier integrity. So the gut barrier integrity. And so here I'm talking about the lining of the gut. And the lining of the gut is what separates what's within the gut, the food that we're breaking down, and everything else that's in the gut from the rest of the body, from the bloodstream. And when we have a compromised gut barrier, also known as you probably would have heard as leaky gut, food before it's been fully broken down can leach through into the bloodstream, and that sets off a inflammation and an immune response and can lead to kids being really reactive and adults being really reactive. So that barrier integrity is really a really important part of the picture as well. And then we have immune regulation. So again, we talked about this quite a bit last week, but when the immune system is nice and regulated, nice and balanced, then the immune system will react appropriately to what it comes in contact with. When there is an imbalanced immune system or a dysregulated immune system, it's prone to misfiring. It's prone to getting things confused and mixed up. Oh, hang on, that doesn't need to be responded to. And so last week we talked about the hygiene hypothesis and how exposure to different microbes, particularly early on in life, can train a child's immune system to know what to respond to and what is harmless. And so that's really important as well. So these factors, enzymes, gut microbiome diversity, gut barrier integrity, and immune regulation are very rarely looked at when it comes to medical approach to allergies and eczema. And we haven't been talking a lot about eczema directly, but this is all very relevant to eczema as well, because a lot of the time, most of the time, kids with eczema have very reactive immune systems. And these factors, it's really important to address these factors in eczema as well as allergies as well. So when we work on improving and optimizing these areas, which really come down to gut health and immune health or immune regulation, the immune system will know what to do when it comes in contact with, different foods or environmental substances. And this approach is going to, give us much better results long term than simply avoiding the trigger and managing symptoms. So let's talk about some practical things that you can do. Obviously, there's a lot in how we sort of approach these different areas from a naturopathic point of view, but I want to give you some really key things and practical things that you can do to start to improve these different areas. So I mentioned quite a few times last week and this week that we want to support diverse microbiome in our kids. And one of the best ways we can do that is to include lots of different plant foods in their diet. So different fibers in plant foods can really help to support that gut microbiome diversity. And so many kids are lacking fiber in their diet. So we can look at how can we include more plant foods into our kids' diet, whether that's different fruits and different vegetables, different nuts, seeds, grains, herbs, spices. So obviously, if we're thinking about kids that already have sensitivities, intolerances, allergies, we want to focus on the foods that they are not reacting to. But the more variety we can get into our kids' diet when it comes to plant foods, the better outcome for their microbiome diversity. And legumes is another one that I didn't mention in that list. So rather than filling the fruit bowl with the same fruits every single week, let's look at how can we add more variety to the types of fruits that we're buying for our kids. And same with vegetables and herbs and spices. And look, I know a lot of kids won't, eat a lot of, different spices and different herbs. But if we can sprinkle in a little bit of dried oregano, a little bit of cumin, a little bit of paprika, we can add some black beans or some chickpeas or some lentils to some of the foods that we're already making for our kids. For example, black beans go really well into Mexican dishes. So can we add some black beans just from a tin into our nacho mix or our taco mix, and we've taken a step towards better microbiome diversity by adding different fibers and plant foods into our kids' diets. So thinking about how we can add more variety in terms of plant foods. And even if it's just small amounts, variety is more important than volume. So it doesn't need to be huge amounts. And I know so many of you listening will have maybe fussy or picky kids, and it's like, yeah, right, I'm not going to get my kids to eat chickpeas or whatever. But even if you can just add a few to a food or a meal that your child already likes, that is a really good big step in the right direction. So we want to be supporting that microbiome diversity. And just another way that I want to mention that we can do that is by encouraging our kids to spend more time outside. Our kids are spending more and more time indoors. We want to, and it can feel like a full-time job to try and get our kids outdoors, depending on what sort of kid they are and how old they are. I know for me, it's tricky in the teenage years, much easier when they're young. So if you've got young kids, act now because, there's so much more that you can do to entertain them outside. And as they become teenagers, it can become harder and harder depending on your kids' interests. So just the nature of being outside, having, focusing on some nature play, or even just being outside, kicking the ball, playing at the park, is going to be really beneficial for their gut microbiome diversity, and it's also going to be great for their vitamin D levels. Now, vitamin D is important for supporting that microbiome diversity, but it's also really important for immune regulation. So vitamin D, obviously from the sun. So our kids spending time outside can really support their vitamin D levels. And for some kids, we need to look at vitamin D supplementation to complement that as well. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, and this is especially relevant if you have fussy eaters or picky eaters and you really can't get that plant diversity into their diet, that plant variety into their diet, you can look at a good quality probiotic supplement. Even if you are getting a variety of foods into your kids, if they've got allergies and eczema, a good quality probiotic supplement can be something to explore. And we can certainly help you with that here at Natural Super Kids in terms of specific strains that are going to be most suitable for your child, depending on whether they have eczema or allergies or, what their sort of overall picture looks like. Because some kids, might have food allergies and be prone to constipation, for example, and not eat a lot of variety of plant food. So the probiotics that's going to be beneficial for them is different from the next child that might have a different health picture. But yeah, the probiotic supplements can be a really good tool, and they're generally pretty easy to get into kids that are fussy eaters, and they can provide some real progress with fussy eaters as well, in terms of if our kids have a healthy microbiome, which probiotics can support, they will be over time more likely to explore a wider range of foods. So there are a few tips that you can focus on: the plant foods, the probiotic supplements, and the vitamin D. Those things are going to make a really big difference to your child's immune regulation, to their gut microbiome diversity, and to their overall digestive function as well. I really hope this information has helped you to see your child's eczema and allergies in a slightly different light. And I think that's really important as parents, that we can come at it from a different angle. Yes, you can keep avoiding that food that your child is allergic to. Yes, you can keep using the steroid cream on your child's eczema when it flares up. But over time, approaching your child's eczema and allergies from this approach, where we're looking at gut health and immune regulation, will make, the world of difference, and will limit the need for those Band-Aid fixes or those fixes that are managing symptoms over time. So next week, I am going to be back with another episode on eczema and allergies, and we're going to specifically be talking next week about food restriction and elimination. So we're going to be diving into that a bit deeper. So I hope to, I was going to say see you there. You know what I mean? I won't see you, but you'll be able to hear me. And if you ever have any feedback on these episodes, if you want to share an insight that you've had or ask a question, please send us an email or reach out to us on Instagram. You can find us over on Instagram at Natural Super Kids. And we often will share information and posts that are complementary to what we're talking about on the podcast as well. Or you can email me, Jessica at Natural Super Kids. I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.